Hello, welcome everybody for our Scotland travel talk. Feel free to pop into that Q&A what your name is, where you're coming from. We are happy to have you here. Hi, Barb. Thanks for joining us. From Alberta. Ooh, we have Judy from Virginia. Awesome. Found others on the way. Perfect. Ooh, we got Spokane, Indiana. We have Claire from Spokane, Lauren from Minnesota, Helen from Ohio. Oh, wow, we've got people all over the place. Thanks for coming, everybody. Let me tell Mexico. Patty from Nebraska. Ooh, we have John joining us from Scotland. Well, we're so excited to have you. For everybody joining us, thank you so much for coming. We are here for our Scotland Castles, Whiskey and Traditions webinar. Feel free to pop into the chat your name and where you're joining us from. We'll be starting in a couple minutes. So, Sue from Boston, Mary from Florida, Cynthia from Phoenix. Awesome. Thank you guys for coming. We're so excited. Now I'm sitting here before the fire, the empty room, the forest choir. Debbie from Toronto. Lots of people from Canada. Thanks for joining. Now they've gone. Silvana from Germany. Awesome. My way is clear, and I know what I will do tomorrow when the hands have shaken and the kisses flowed. Well, I will then. Well, as I said, thank you again for joining us for our Scotland travel talk. We'll get started in just a minute or two here, but yeah, feel free to pop into the chat where you're joining us from. Perfect. And also, if you're joining us on Facebook Live as well, feel free to pop into that comment section there. But I think we're gonna start, getting started here. So thank you everybody for joining. My name is Marissa. I work here at Go Ahead Tours on our traveler support team, and you are joining us for our Scotland Castles, Whiskey and Traditions travel talk today. So we're in a Zoom webinar, so we can't see you, we can't hear you, but we do definitely want to hear from you. So feel free to pop in any questions that you might have, that you want our panelists here to answer for you. Go ahead into that Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, or right on into the comment section if you're joining us with Facebook Live. We'll try and answer your questions as they pop up throughout the webinar, but we will have a section right there at the end where you will be able to, we'll answer some of the questions that do come up. But yeah, so if you are here today, you must be just like me. You must be blown away by the raw beauty of the Scottish Highlands. You must be captivated by the elegance of the incredible castles that are dotted across the landscape. You must be intrigued by the unique stories of Scottish lore and their country's traditions. I don't know about you, but I definitely believe in the Loch Ness monster. I swear I will see her someday. But whether your ancestors heir from Scotland, whether you're a diehard fan of Outlander, The Crown, Mary Queen of Scots, or whether you just believe that Scotch whiskey is the superior whiskey, Scotland is the place for you. So join us today as we learn more from Austin about our tours to Scotland, the country's history and traditions, their sweeping landscapes and traditions, the beautiful castles, and then also from Neil about what really distinguishes Scotch whiskey from all other whiskeys. And as I said too, feel free to pop in those questions. We have some pre-submitted questions that we'll make sure to chat about throughout the presentation and at the end. And for those of you who had submitted some specific questions about, the status of Scotland right now and, your specific itinerary and your reservation, we are more than happy to chat with you about that as well. We recommend reaching out to our traveler support team, and we'll also have a member of our team reach out with those specific questions. But today we're going to learn more about just Scotland in general. So we're so excited to chat. But, here at Go Ahead, we really believe the best way to learn about the world is to experience it. And we want to help our travelers do just that. So we want to open the world through education and help our travelers to really experience these countries from the perspective of a local. And we want to take care of all those little details, ensuring that as travel is opening back up, and it is, we currently have 2 domestic national parks itineraries on the ground right now. So we're so excited. Travel's opening back up. But as we get you on the road, we really want to make sure that everything is arranged for you so you can have an incredible and safe experience as we're getting back out into the world. So between our handpicked hotels and meals, the on-tour transportation and flight itineraries personalized to get you to and from your trip, Go Ahead really cultivates unique and unforgettable experiences for our travelers. And what really brings our tours to life are our incredible tour directors and local guides. Their passion and love for the countries that we visit really bring the whole experience to life. And today we are so lucky to be joined by one of each. So first, I would love to welcome Neil, who is a Scotch whiskey expert. We visit him during our tour to Scotland, and he is here with us today. Hi, Neil.
Thanks, Marissa. Good evening, everyone. I'm Neil Forbes. I'm a Scotch whisky expert based in Edinburgh, our capital city, and by far the finest city in our country.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. And we also would love to welcome Austin, who is one of our amazing Scotland tour directors. And he's going to start us off by talking about, one of our Scotland itineraries. Hi, Austin. Thanks for joining.
Hello, Marissa. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. So, I guess I'm taking over. Fantastic. Hello, everyone. Hwyd mé le fáilte, fáilte go alba, agus fáilte go glashu. Just said to you in Scots Gaelic, 1,000 welcomes, 100,000 welcomes. Welcome to Scotland and welcome to Glasgow. Despite what Neil says, it is the best city in the whole of Scotland. I'm going to talk to you specifically about this tour of Edinburgh and the Scots Highlands. It is absolutely my favourite tour to do. It's 10 or 12 days and it takes you all round. One question I'd been getting repeatedly over and over before I started this talk was, what are the must-sees in Scotland? So that's exactly what I'm going to address here. I'm not going to tell you about the whole tour. I'm going to tell you about the must-sees on this tour, or if you're ever coming by yourselves. So if you look down at the bottom of this map on the left, I'm in Glasgow at the bottom there, the best city in Scotland, as I said, west coast, best coast. And over on the east coast, there is Edinburgh, where Neil is currently sitting. You can tell there's a bit of a rivalry between our cities. And then here are the sites that we are going to see. So let's get started. Where are we going to start? We're going to start basically in the capital of Scotland, Edinburgh. This beautiful view from Calton Hill in Edinburgh's new town, looking into the old town in the distance, and that amazing building on the top there is the place that everyone wants to see in Scotland, Edinburgh Castle. It's up there on a really, really high rock. I'll tell you right now, this tour is all about castles, and castles are hard to get into, but not for your tourists. So what are we going to see when we get to the castle? Well, here we are right in front of it. Another view from the old town on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, this is the esplanade before you walk into the castle. And what's happening here? It's the Edinburgh military tattoo. This happens every year in August. Didn't happen last year, of course. And it only lasts 21 performances over 3 weeks in August. It is an amazing experience. They're all evening performances except for 2 matinees. They bring together pipes and drums from bands from all over the world and all different militaries from everywhere. I'm happy to answer more questions on that later on. What can you see once you're inside the castle? Well, the first thing that everybody wants to see on the top left-hand corner is the 1 o'clock gun. This is a gun that's fired every day except Sunday at 1 o'clock. It's an old tradition in Edinburgh, and when you come on the tour, I'll tell you all about why we do it. Top right-hand corner is the oldest building in Scotland. It's St. Margaret's Chapel, and it's almost 1,000 years old. It's tiny, tiny little place. And right beside it, you can actually see it sticking out behind the chapel, is this gun on the left-hand side at the bottom. It's a 15th century cannon called Monsmeg, and it was given to King James IV of Scotland as a wedding present, because it's so hard to buy something for a king on his wedding. Bottom right-hand corner, the Great Hall, the painted Great Hall with the wooden ceilings. Really ancient. All of these sites you will see when you get into Edinburgh. So that's the castle, but what else can you see? Because Edinburgh's a really, really quirky little, it's quite an easy city to get around. Lots of steps, lots of stairs, and lots of hills. But you can see all these quirky little things here in the old town. These are called the closes, and they will take you through all the back streets of the city. It's an amazing place to visit. The tour is 10 days long, but there's a 2-day extra extension to Edinburgh at the end of it. I would urge you to really consider taking that, because you will love Edinburgh when you get there. So where are we going to go next? Well, we're going to go across country, and we're staying in what we call the Lowlands, the lowlands just now, and we're going to visit this loch. This is Loch Lomond. Now, there are no lakes in Scotland. We only have lochs, and there's 33,000 of them. Loch Lomond is the biggest. You can see it in this map on the right-hand side. It's the loch right in the center, sort of triangular shaped and long, with the dotted line running up the side of it. And on the left-hand side, on the hillside there, that plant is the bonny Scottish heather. Loch Lomond, we visit here, we go past and we get a photo stop at it. You may know the song, The Bonny Banks of Loch Lomond. So that's the first stop. So where are we going next in the lowlands? We're going to Stirling Castle. Now, personally, this is my favourite castle on the whole tour. Edinburgh is huge and a must-see. Stirling is exactly the same, but just on a smaller scale. You can see the same gatehouse. It has a great hall here. That's the building on the right-hand side of the left-hand picture that's painted golden. This was the main castle for the royal family before Edinburgh, because it was much more central and much easier to defend. What can you see once we're inside Stirling Castle? On the top left-hand side, there is the throne room. That was where the king or the queen would have sat, and then the royal bedchamber on the right-hand side. You may be able to see a picture of the two ladies dressed up in 17th and 16th century dress. These are the guides in Stirling Castle. They dress up as people from that time, and they interact with you, unless they're dressed up as the Queen, in which case the Queen doesn't talk to commoners. Speaking of Queens, bottom left-hand corner, Mary Queen of Scots, our most famous monarch, probably. Mary Queen of Scots was born in Linlithgow Castle, about 20 miles away, but she was crowned and grew up for the first 9 years in Stirling Castle here. Ultimately, she came to a very sad end. She was executed by her cousin down in England 42 years later at Fotheringay Castle, and you can see that right there. Come on the tour, I'll tell you all of those stories. So, Stirling Castle, amazing, much more manageable. Let's go north and get up into the Scottish Highlands. The vistas that you see here are just amazing. This is Loch Cluny. Loch Cluny is right up in the northwest of the country, and it's a beautiful part of the country. So the Highlands are in the northwest of Scotland. They're beautiful, they're desolate, they're empty, but for roads and hotels and amazing views. What else are you going to see when we get into the Highlands? So, fantastic. My favourite mountain in the whole of Scotland. This is the Buchel Etive Moor. It's in the northwest central part of Scotland. It's on a plain called Rannoch Moor, and it's going to take you. We go right past this mountain. It's an absolutely amazing sight. And once we go past this mountain, we start sweeping down into Glencoe. I'm going to show you the first slide of Glencoe. Fabulous. This is a set of mountains. As you go down into Glencoe, we stop here. They are called the Three Sisters. You may have noticed at the beginning, the opening slide was a piper standing in front of a mountain. This is where that piper was standing, because it's such a beautiful view. The Three Sisters are on their way into Glencoe, and then we sweep down and down and down. You start to see all of these amazing green vistas here. That's another view, and the old military road that's running through there. We'll come back to that military road in a second. Once down into the glen, you will see quirky little houses like this sitting all by themselves out on this beautiful scrubland. All of the land around here is peat, which is that heating substance that grows naturally in the ground here in Glencoe. Glencoe's famous. If you are a James Bond fan, these are a couple of my friends at the spot where they filmed Skyfall in 2012. This is the site where James Bond arrives up in the Highlands for his Scottish ancestral home. So Glencoe, we travel all the way through Glencoe. It is just a beautiful place. There's a lot more stories connected with Glencoe, including a very infamous massacre. But again, tell you all about that when you come on the tour. So we've traveled through Glencoe. Where are we going to next? We are going to, this is a great, great castle. This is, this tour amongst our tour directors is known as the ABC tour, because every time you look round, there's another blooming castle. This is Loch Arkert. There you go, try saying that, Arkert on Loch Ness. It's a beautiful, beautiful loch, a beautiful, beautiful castle. I'm showing you from the water. I think we're going to show you from the land in a second as well. Yeah, here it is from the land. Now, it's quite a beautiful ruined castle looking right over onto the loch. It was destroyed in the 17th century. And as you can see, like all of the castles, it's pretty steep and difficult to get in and out of.
Yeah, Oscar, I was going to ask, we had a good number of travelers who were asking questions, about mobility, how accessible are these sorts of castles for our travelers?
Yes, thank you very much. The minute this slide came up, I immediately thought, yes, this is something we should be talking about right now. As I keep saying, castles are not meant to be easy to get into, but of course now with tourists, we make them all incredibly accessible. So at Arkert Castle, we start at the top of the site, and at the top of the site, there are free mobility scooters for you to pick up. So if anyone with mobility issues can get a free mobility scooter. Same at Stirling Castle, they have mobility scooters as well. And Edinburgh Castle has a really unique system whereby they have a taxi that picks you up on the esplanade and drives you all the way to the top of the castle. So you just have to walk down, and you only ever have to walk as far as the next guide in the castle, because if you can't walk any further, you just say to them, "Can I get the car?" And they bring it round for you again. So like with many things, like Edinburgh's a hilly city, there needs to be some kind of mobility for walking about it. But really at that point, it's doing as much or as little walking as you want. But once you're in these castles that are meant to be accessible, we make them as accessible as possible for you.
Awesome. Thanks for more info on that. Yeah.
You're welcome. Okay, I think the next slide is going to be, yes, my favorite thing to do. Once we have visited Arkert Castle, we go down and we get onto a boat, and the boat takes us on a ride across Loch Ness. It's beautiful. Loch Ness is the deepest loch in Scotland. Loch Lomond before was the longest loch in Scotland, but Loch Ness has a huge, huge depth to it, and that's a great place for this lady to hide in. Of course, the Loch Ness Monster, as mentioned by Marissa at the beginning. Sightings over the century, sightings for thousands of years. And I can tell you right now that if you come on the tour and if you go on Loch Ness and you get a guaranteed photograph of the Loch Ness Monster, go ahead, we'll refund you the whole money for the tour. You get your tour completely free as long as you get a photograph of Nessie. All good for you.
Challenge accepted.
Fantastic. I have had so many over the years. Okay, where are we going next? We are going to another blooming castle. You may recognize this castle. This is Elin Donon Castle, and we visit this as an excursion, an add-on to the tour on the day that we visit the Isle of Skye, which I'm going to come to next. Elin Donon is the most photographed castle in Scotland, and it's been used in a lot of films as well. You may recognise a couple here. Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery in Highlander in the mid-80s, and then it was used as MI6's headquarters in the Bond film Die Another Day. It's also been used in Outlander. It features a little bit in Braveheart. You can't miss this castle, and it's on the way to Skye. Now, once we get to Skye, oh my goodness, the sights that you can see on Skye. It is an add-on to the tour, but it's not to be missed. Right up here in the top right-hand corner is the Old Man of Storr, a single standing stone. You'll see it again in this next picture, because I've got somebody photographing the Old Man of Storr. We passed this on our trip through the island with the most amazing tour guides. The Old Man of Storr is, there's a whole myth and legend about it. Come on the tour, the local guides will tell you about it. What else do we see on Skye? Well, here's my favourite little bit on the left-hand side, Neast Point Lighthouse over there. That's at the very north of the island. And then in the 1990s, we used to have to take a ferry to get to Skye. Now we go on a bridge to Skye. So if you know the Skye Boat song, where they sing about going over the sea to Skye, we now do it on a bus. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. One or two more things just about Skye, and then I'm going to wrap up. I think we're on to the next, please. Brilliant. I couldn't leave these mountains out. These are the Black Cuillin Mountains. They are on Skye. They're in the southwestern part of Skye, and they are just beautiful granite mountains, all kind of pointy and dramatic. Here they're sort of shrouded a bit in cloud, but this is the Cuillins. This is one of the things you can see. And then I think finally we're going to come on to a lovely slide of the main town of Skye. This is Portree, where we stop and we have some time, and we take some time for some lunch, and who knows, maybe even a wee drink. There you go. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Austin, for walking through that. That sounds so wonderful. I wish I was walking through, the cute little town of Portree right now. And I'm sure that if I was, I would definitely take a stop in one of the local pubs and get myself a dram of whiskey. But luckily we have Neil here with us today to talk more about Scotch whiskey, what it is, what the different types of Scotch are, so that if we ourselves find ourselves in a pub, we know what to ask for. So Neil, take it away. We are so excited to learn.
Thanks, Marissa. Good evening again, everyone. As I say, Neil Forbes, a single malt Scotch whisky expert. What I'm going to do this evening is tell you the definition of single malt whisky. I'm going to explain to you the right way and the wrong way to drink single malt whisky. And finally, we're going to finish and show you how to enjoy a good dram of whisky. Now, a dram of whisky here in Scotland is a measure. It's not a measure of whisky, rather, sorry. It's not measure. It is a drink of whisky. Everyone else pours by the measure, but here in Scotland, if you visit someone's house, you should never have less than 2 fingers in your glass. So a dram is as little or as much as you so wish to have in your glass. So single malt whisky. The word single quite simply means one whisky made in one distillery. Malt whisky defines to us simple terms of the ingredients: water, barley, and yeast. So that defines single malt whisky for you. Quite straightforward. You may have heard of double malt whisky. It is 2 distilleries collaborating together to make malt whisky with the 3 ingredients. The right way and the wrong way to drink single malt whisky is quite simple. You have people all over the world telling you you've got to warm it in your hand to room temperature. What is room temperature? It's different all over the world. So there's no such thing, to be quite honest with you. You get people saying you cannot take anything in your whisky. It must be straight is the real way to drink it. Us here in Scotland disagree with that. I always say you take water in your whisky, because what is it made with? It's made with water. So you have to be taking water in the first instance in your whisky. Some people can say, on the rocks, can I put ice in my whisky? Absolutely. The only science we actually know at this moment is when you cool your whisky down, it closes the flavours. As the ice melts and the water emanates over the whisky, it opens the flavours from there. I was always taught to take a little drop of water in my whisky because it opens the oil. It separates the oils in your whisky and opens the flavours for you. And I'll explain that in a couple of minutes when we have our dram. Others will ask, sparkling water, soda water, lemonade. Yes, absolutely. The only difference there is the bubbles will prevent the oils from separating and the flavours from opening up. All you're doing is diluting it. Diageo Edrington Group are the largest producers of single malt whisky here in Scotland, export to all over the world, in particular into Asia, where the young Asian people make hundreds and hundreds of whisky cocktails. That's what's made Scottish whisky away from the cottage industry here in the country to a worldwide commodity. Who are we to say you're wrong, to drink it whatever way you see fit to drink it yourself? However, never ever let me catch you putting Coca-Cola in a single malt whisky. Now we're going to have a little dram. So anyone online this evening has joined me in a Balvenie double wood. I suggested this one because I reckon for people taking up drinking whisky, it is the centre of the flavour map we refer to, and it is a lovely flavoured whisky to wet your palate and enjoy. We learn everything about single malt whisky by using our eyes and our nose. The tasting of it is purely for the pleasure. You may have heard of blended whisky. We have master blenders who mix up to 50 or over 50 different single malt whiskies with a third whisky we make here in Scotland called single grain whisky. And they mix all that together day after day, week after week, year after year, decade after decade, and the whisky is exactly the same. And they achieve that by looking and by nosing. So once you've poured your whisky, hopefully everyone's got one poured just with us just now, the first thing you do is you look at the colour of it. You may see on the screen here, this is a right dark colour. Some of the whiskies are really light, straw colour, very pale. And the colour tells us a lot. Very pale, very straw, actually tells us it's matured in American oak, previously used in the American bourbon industry. That will emit different aromas to us. I can tell you right away, it will be vanilla. It'll be citrus, maybe some lemon, some lime, sometimes orange. The darker colour tells us it's also matured in European oak, generally used in European sherry making. The oak in Europe is darker, it's softer, and actually naturally colours your whisky to this colour. You then give it a wee shake about. Here in Scotland, we call it gie it a good shugle. Give your glass a shake, and you'll look at the legs dropping down on your glass here. And this Balvenie double wood, they're nice and slow, they're nice and thick. That tells me it's quite an oily whisky. It's a rich whisky. I can plot it on a flavour map if I had more time with you. Then you take it to your nose. Breathe in. The best way to nose and get the aromas of a single malt whisky is take it to one nostril at a time. Open your mouth and breathe naturally. Now in the Balvenie double wood, you shouldn't get any real strong alcohol burn off that. The first thing you should actually have is some lovely caramel, some lovely honey, even into toffee. And hopefully one or two of you who have that can get these lovely, sweet, sweet, rich aromas. A little bit of nuts, hazelnuts, almonds, ginger, and also a little bit dark chocolate. If you ever used cooking chocolate, open a packet of cooking chocolate and smell it. It's exactly the same in there. So again, we've learned a lot. We've learned the colour. We can actually plot that in a whisky flavour map quite easily by looking at all these things and nosing it. Now comes the pleasure. We're going to have a little taste of it. Here in Scotland, we refer to it as slange. Slangevar, which is Gaelic for good health. Cheers. So before we drink it, slange.
Slange.
Enjoying that, Marissa? On the taste, you might get a little bit burn, but just breathe, lick your lips a couple of times, just swallow normally, and that alcohol burn will disappear very quickly. You should get the caramel, the toffee, almost like a toffee apple coming through there. Chocolate, honey, and a little bit nuts, dry nuts like hazelnuts. If you eat some hazelnuts, you get that dryness. And at the back of that is like ginger. You get a little bit spice of ginger. Wonderful, warming, medium finish. Should be sitting at the back of your tongue. Lovely. Well, let's say 9:30 p.m. here in Edinburgh. So it's a lovely time of night to have a wee dram. As I said to you before, I think the right way to drink it, and the way I was always taught to drink it, was to put a touch of water in it. If you're fortunate enough to have a pipette, if not, if you've got some water with you, just dip your finger in it, put a couple of drops in, and look very, very closely. You will actually see, as you put the water in, the oils open up, the natural oils separating. And what we're doing here is we're opening the flavours. Remember, if it cools down with ice, it closes the flavours. We're opening them here. Take it back to your nose. And if you did have an alcohol burn, it's gone. It's so smooth with the water. Not so heavy in the toffee, some lovely light caramel, and the honey becomes more and more prominent with the nuts. And even now you get the ginger coming through on the aroma, and it changes so much with a couple of drops of water.
Now, Neil, can you tell us again what we're drinking today, the type of whiskey?
Yes, there is it's Balvenie Double Wood. Balvenie is what's called a Speyside whisky, and that's up not quite in the Highlands of Scotland. It's further east in Inverness. It is part of the Highland region, but the Speyside is referred to as the River Spey, which runs from Aviemore in the Cairngorm Mountains up to the Moray Firth. And to be classed as a Speyside whisky, the distillery should be sited within a half mile of the River Spey. That defines a Speyside whisky. So it's Balvenie Double Wood. So we're going to take it back to our mouth again after the nose. It softens the nose, and just have another taste of this. Slange again.
Slange.
The alcohol burn has gone. Lovely smooth. You get the caramel, the toffee, the softness of that toffee apple again. Lovely ginger spices, warming spices, just hitting the back of your tongue, on your throat. Wonderful. That's a perfect way to drink a single malt whisky. One of the major questions I always get when I do whisky tastings here in Scotland, and particularly from American and Canadian audiences, is what's the best whisky? Is it Irish whisky or is it Scottish whisky? First of all, I've got to say it's not the best question to ask a Scotsman, because I am going to be biased on that, and I always say it's Scottish whisky, it's far better, but I can justify it. Most of you have heard of Jameson's Irish whisky. It is the second oldest whisky in Ireland. It actually sells more whisky than all other distilleries put together in Ireland. It started in 1742 with a chap called John Jameson, who emigrated to Ireland from a town called Alloa here in Scotland. We actually showed them how to make their best whisky. Slange.
Slange. Slange more.
We do have a couple questions here too, Neil. I had somebody who was asking about the Macallan 25-year-old rare cask. How would you rate that?
Rate it. I've only ever tasted it once, to be honest with you. It's very, very expensive. I think the 25-year-old rare cask will probably be something in the region of about £4,000 to £5,000 a bottle. But I think the best way to explain that is, here in Scotland, there is no such thing as a bad Scottish whisky. Just some are better than others.
Love it. That's great. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, yeah, thank you so much for talking about this wonderful piece of Scottish culture. You know, really Scotland's such a land of rich in heritage and, so many traditions, from bagpipes to, the Highland games and everything. So today, we'll learn some more too from Austin about the significance of tartans and kilts. And then Neil's going to talk with us some more about the Scottish ceilidh. So Austin, first, I would love to hear more about the power of plaid in Scotland.
Yeah, the trouble is, Marissa, I'm really enjoying this whiskey. Can we do it in 10 minutes? Just before I start on the tartan as well, just to echo what Neil says about the Scots and the Irish whiskies, another great difference between Scots and Irish whiskey is that we generally only distill our whiskey twice. to get our product. In Ireland, they distill it 3 times. So they have to take 3 tries to get a good whiskey, where we can do it in 2. So that's much better Scotch whiskey. So, hello again, everyone. If anyone can see me on the screen, I have changed out of my tweed and tartan into a Scotland football top, and you'll see why that is later on. So, I'm going to talk to you about the most recognisable thing that makes people to realise that we are Scottish, and that is the tartan. Now, you might think it's whiskey, but not everybody drinks, though, you know, it's an amazing thing. But tartan is known all over the world. Now, how did tartan start? Well, hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, we were just weaving, I say we, I've never woven a thing in my life. We were just weaving large, long bits of woolen cloth with different colours and dyes, and we would be making something like what you're seeing in this picture here. This is the ancient great kilt. It would just be a long piece of material wrapped round the body and over the shoulder to keep you warm, a bit like how the Romans would have made a toga way back sort of 2,000 years. But then it became much more modern in modern times. So in the next picture, you may also recognize it from here. So there's some of the television and films that you can see it in. On the left-hand side, oh, isn't he rugged? Jamie Fraser there in Outlander, if you're a fan, wearing quite a muted colour, and he's standing beside Bonnie Prince Charlie, the Jacobite upstart rebel from the 18th century. And on the right-hand side, you will also see Big Mel Gibson playing Sir William Wallace, the Guardian of Scotland, in Braveheart from the mid-90s. He's wearing a much more traditional kilt, as you see, wrapped over his shoulder and round his armour, and carrying the big two-handed claymore sword. So how do we get to this point? Well, here are a few very, very famous people wearing kilts. Sean Connery in the middle, you'll obviously recognise him, and the wonderful Robin Williams on the right-hand side. And, you know, frankly, better looking than both of them on the other side. That's me in my Clan Buchanan kilt. I'll come on to clans in a little while when I start talking you through this. But that was me. I also work in Iceland, and I was wearing an Icelandic jumper. So originally, when I did this talk, it was going to be much more about the history of the kilt, but then I thought, no, I'm just going to show you how to put a kilt outfit together. And so that's the modern kilt. So where are we going to start? So this is roughly what you would be wearing if you were wearing a Scottish kilt outfit. The elements are all there. So where do we start with these elements? Let's go straight away to the jacket. So the kilt jacket coming in here. Now, here are a few options. On the left-hand side is the Argyle jacket, much more sort of like, it's almost kind of day wear kind of kilt jacket you see all the time. On the right-hand side, you have the Prince Charlie, named after Bonnie Prince Charlie, and is a much more formal way of wearing the kilt. And in the center, this is a very modern jacket called the Jacobite, and it harks back to that 18th century where the men were wearing things like this during the Jacobite rebellions of the 18th century. Incidentally, Jacobite comes from the name James. In Latin, it's Jacob. So they were fighting for King James VII of the United Kingdom. So they became known as the Jacobites. So you pick a jacket, which one would you like? And then we'll move on to the kilt. Now, I've shown you the back of these kilts right here because I've had so many North Americans come here and buy themselves a kilt, and invariably, and I don't know what it is, everyone puts it on back to front. The pleats, as you can see here, are at the back of the kilt, and it's just, they look amazing when they put them on the wrong way around, but you know, you have to kind of go and say to people, just give it a wee 180, just spin it right round. So here in the next slide is how it should look from the front, and I couldn't resist putting this kilt in because it's one of the brightest you can possibly buy. The Loud MacLeod. The MacLeods are a big clan. I'm going to come on to clans in a second. They are up in the northwest of Scotland. They are on the Isle of Skye and in the Highlands. They're a very big, proud clan. I was asked by somebody, do we go to Skye? Yes, we do. We go to Skye. So if you look on the left-hand side of this picture, up at the top, there is a point where it says McKinnon right in the middle there. And just above it, it says MacLeod. That's the Isle of Skye that I was talking about earlier. All of the families of Scotland are known as clans. Clan comes from the Scots Gaelic word, which means children, and by extension, it means family. So every family has its own area. My wonderful colleague here, Neil, is a Forbes, and he is over on the east, the northern east side of the country. You might be able to pick out Forbes up there. My clan, Buchanan, is down in the Lowlands. You can't actually see it. It's very, very hard to read. It's down round about Glasgow. So that's the kind of clan map. And if you have like Scottish affiliation and you may be coming here, this is a great way of finding out where your family come from. So you've picked a kilt. Let's get on to some of the accessories, please. So what's the first thing you're going to buy? So you might have seen the bag that's on the front. That bag is called a sporran. Two particular types you can pick: the dress sporran, which is usually fur, mostly fake fur these days, unless you buy an old one, or on the right-hand side, the leather day sporran. I have a leather day sporran when I go out wearing my kilt. I tend to only have 3 things in it: my wallet, my telephone, and a lipstick, because you've got to have some mystery about you. You really do. So you could also, maybe if you're feeling a little bit, a little bit out there, you could maybe get one of these amazing military sporrans. On the right-hand side, this black one with the white tassels, that is the dress sporran, the formal sporran of a Scottish regiment called the Argyle and Scottish Highlanders, who you're going to see in the next picture. I have included this picture here. You mentioned right at the start, someone called John from Glasgow. That's a friend of mine who put me right on all of my military stuff. These are the Argyle and Southern Highlanders during the Crimean War, facing down the Russians. And you can see they're all wearing these sporrans, the black sporrans with the white front, made out of badger fur. This painting is called the Thin Red Line. Their regiment was not strong enough from all their losses to make a 4-deep line at this battle, so they could only put 2 and maybe 3 at the most. So they became known as the Thin Red Line. That has come and found its way into modern usage, both in the US, Canada, and the UK as the Thin Blue Line, referring to the police. Now, you've picked your sporran. What are we going to get next? We're going to get kilt, hose, and flashes. So lots of different options here. The hose are the socks and the flashes are the garters. So you can have plain, you can have patterned, you can have ribbed, the whole lot there. And then the flashes are the garters, those red, green, and red things there that help hold them up as well.
Now, Austin, what is poking out of that man's sock?
Yes, you're coming in. Yes, I hope you'd spot that. Well, that is, I think it's in the next slide as well. That is a knife called a skean dhu. Now, in the United Kingdom, I am not allowed to carry an offensive weapon in any way, shape, or form. I can't carry a knife. I can't carry a gun, anything like that. However, if I am wearing my national dress, if I'm dressed in kilt and hose and flashes and jacket, I am legally allowed to carry one of these knives because it's part of my national dress. It's like maybe in Nepal with the Gurkhas, or sorry, the Tibet with the Gurkhas, they have their kukri knives. That's their national dress. They're allowed to carry them. It's a small knife. Skean dhu means black knife. Now, when you went to a meeting in the olden days, you would be asked to disarm, leave all your weapons outside. So the Highlanders would take off all their weapons, but they always had a knife down the inside of their socks just in case there was a problem. So that's the skean dhu, and it's the second last thing you're going to put into your kilt outfit. The final thing would be these traditional shoes called Gilly Brogues. The Gilly Brogue is basically a leather shoe without a tongue in it. A gilly was a word for an old Scots gamekeeper up on the Highland estates who would look after the fish and all the fowl and all the fauna on the estate. I've got a picture in the next slide of Queen Victoria with her very famous gilly, John Brown, there. And you can see he's wearing his regimental sporran there. So that's the elements of the tartan. So once you've got them there, that's you've made, I've given you kind of like lots of different options here, different style jackets, different style sporrans. Which one are you going to pick? That's your complete outfit. Now, why am I wearing a Scotland football top, if you can see me? Well, the kilt wasn't that popular up until the late 1970s here, when Scotland qualified for the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup in Argentina. And lots of Scots men particularly went off to see the World Cup. And while they were at the World Cup, this guy in the next slide, on the left-hand side, Archie Gemmill. We didn't do very well at the World Cup. However, this guy, Archie Gemmill, scored one of the greatest goals of all time that every Scots person, as soon as they've got a whiskey in them, will wax lyrical about. And he kind of like was the genesis for the modern, what we call the Tartan Army. And if you look on the right-hand side, that photo on the right-hand side is our very own Neil Forbes there, dressed up, because he's really instrumental in the Scots Tartan Army there. He's head of a charity. He can maybe tell you after this what the charity is as well. And then I have one more picture of the Tartan Army here as well. They travel all over the world. They get all these hats. That is a Kilmarnock bonnet with pheasant feathers. They've all got their kilts on. They're amazing ambassadors for our country. People love seeing them. They're absolutely great, and they help with the resurgence, because now just about everyone in Scotland, every man in Scotland has a kilt, and maybe in the future the kilt's going to look more like this. These are some modern iterations that fashion designers are doing with our kilt. The most recognizable one there, second from the left, is the Burberry tartan kilt, but the rest of them are all super modern. So that's the future of the kilt. I hope I've shown you how to put them all together. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. And we do have a couple questions, from the audience. One, Frank had asked, do women wear kilts? How do they wear and represent their clan colors?
Okay, well, yes, thank you very much for that. Not as many women wear kilts. There is a longer version of a kilt that is a female kilt, which is very, very out of favor. But women tend to accessorize kilts a lot. There's nothing to say that a woman cannot put on a kilt. There's a famous Scottish fashion designer here called Pam Hogg who makes kilts for women, but they're not usually seen. But what you usually get is women wearing lots of accessories, so kilt, tartan scarves, tartan bags, tartan jackets. But there are women who do wear them, and they're not as commonly seen.
And then do travelers have an opportunity, to purchase a kilt while they're on tour?
Absolutely. I always say to my travelers, I can say that just about every tour I've ever been on, be it Go Ahead or EF, working with the school kids, someone has bought a kilt. There's kind of three ways to do it that I always suggest to people. One, if you're really serious about it, go to a kilt maker, spend about £1,000. What's that, about $1,500, and get a full one of these outfits made. That's the Rolls Royce of it. Two, go to a tourist shop. They sell cheap kilts, which I always refer to as fun kilts. You can buy something like that if you just want something fun to take home with you. But number three, the middle option, which I think is a great thing, is there's always lots of vintage clothing stores. There's a great one in Edinburgh called Armstrong's that has about 3 or 4 units. And there are some over here in Glasgow, one called Mr. Ben. And they often sell a lot of old kilts. And if you have a half an hour to an hour to go in and try them on, you can usually find one that fits. And I've seen lots and lots of people do it and then put them on back to front. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking more, about kilts. And I think that another great opportunity for wearing kilt outfits would be at the traditional Scottish Ceilidh, which has tons of live music and dancing and lots of people in kilts. So Neil, I would love to hear more from you about this tradition.
Yes, Marissa. A Ceilidh is pronounced Ceilidh as Kaylee. Is a Gaelic word, or the Scottish Gaelic word for visit or visitation. So in the 19th century, the 1800s, people used to, in the remote areas in the Highlands, used to visit each other's houses, the village hall, and sit and tell stories and sing songs. The modern day version of that is full of dances. And I'm sure most people have heard of some of the dances we have: the Gay Gordons, the Dashing White Sergeant, the Eightsome Reel, and the military two-step. They're held all over the country, all around the year, and quite often a wedding actually hosts as a Ceilidh as well. And visitors are always welcome. There's normally a live band performs at a Ceilidh, and it's a guitarist, a keyboard player, an accordionist, and always a Scottish fiddle. A fiddler plays there, and it's all traditional Scottish music, and it's in sets of 2s, 4s, 6s, or 8s. And the picture you can see, the video going just now, is actually Dashing White Sergeant, which is groups of 6, 3 couples from there. If you ever see a Ceilidh taking place or hear one taking place when you're visiting here in Scotland, please just pop in and see what's going on. Take part if you can. The band will always have what's called a caller. They will explain all the steps as you go along. However, more than half of Scots people, male and female, have no idea what's going on as well. So just take part, enjoy, and have some great fun. But just be careful. Never mix too many whiskies when you're attending a Ceilidh.
That's awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, both Austin and Neil, for this presentation. That kind of draws us to a close for the presentation section. But we are going to be moving into our question and answer section. So keep popping questions into that chat, both in Facebook Live and in the Zoom webinar, and we are super happy to answer them. The one I want to start us off with, Mary was asking, and this could be for either Neil or Austin, what's the best time to visit Scotland? And also, do we have any packing tips, especially for the Scottish Highlands?
Can I take that one, Neil?
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you very much. Well, okay. No one comes to Scotland for the weather. We always say that we don't have bad weather here, just the wrong clothes. So I always suggest that if you don't come in high summer because it's the busiest time, if you come in what I call, and I think it's referred to in North America as shoulder season. So April, May, September, October. If you come in August, Edinburgh's population in August goes from 500,000 people to 1.5 million. It's really, really busy. If you want the hustle and bustle, that's amazing. But, I think around about those times, hotels aren't as busy, people aren't as harassed, and they have more time to spend with you. And a great packing tip for Scotland is bring a raincoat and a sun hat, because we often get 4 seasons in one day. You walk quite a bit in Scotland if you're up for walking, so some good sensible flat shoes, but that's essentially what you need. You need some sun protection and you need a lot of rain protection.
That's great. Awesome. And then Neil, we have a question for you. When a traveler is in Edinburgh, is there any place that you would recommend for them to go to try some whiskey in their free time?
Yeah, well, the closest distillery to Edinburgh is called Glencoe, which is referred to as the Edinburgh Malt. It's about a 20-minute drive out of Edinburgh. It's a lowland whisky. I'm very close to that. I worked there for several years as a tour guide. It's a fantastic whisky. It's a sponsor of the military tattoo. Really worth visiting. It dates back to 1837, right in a little glen. Wonderful drive out in a lovely little village. And finish off your tour with a fantastic dram of whisky as well. So that's Glencoe, I would recommend, from Edinburgh.
Awesome. That's great. And then a question for you, Austin. Noel was wondering, what kind of is like the average age of our travelers that usually go on our Scotland tours? Do we have any more, younger or adventure groups specifically, or yeah?
Oh, jings. Well, from my experience, the mix is very much that. That's the word I would use, is a mix. I've had families on tour. I've had young couples on tour. I have had people in their 80s that I couldn't have told you were in their 80s because they were so active. They were amazing. But you seem to get all sorts. What I particularly, I work for other companies as well, and what I particularly like about what Go Ahead does is that you can opt in or opt out of things, whereas other companies that I work with, you do everything in the tour. And I think that opting in and opting out attracts a bit more of a younger crowd as well, who maybe don't want to go to everything, but want to have some free times in cities. So I think the youngest person I've had was, in a family, and she was 9 years old. And I'm pretty sure the oldest person was 88, and he was amazing.
That's great. Awesome. People asked a lot about souvenirs, and specifically Debbie was wondering, and I want to hear from both of you guys, what would you say is the one souvenir that you definitely think that people should bring back with them when they're traveling back home?
Whiskey.
Yeah, a good whiskey, but sometimes it's difficult to get a whiskey back out of the country, in particular to America. But we have such thing called a quaich. It's Quaich, and it's what's referred to as a friendship cup. It's pewter, generally pewter, which is an old metal, and they vary from different sizes. And the traditional way of greeting each other in houses, I'm going back a few centuries, was to pour some whiskey into that quaich and offer it to your friends, your visitors, and that. So it is a real traditional dish, and I would also definitely recommend a quaich as a take home from the country.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent thing to suggest. And the thing that I would suggest is some Scottish knitwear, because we make some amazing knitwear, both in plaids and in plains, and getting something cashmere that's made down in the borders of Scotland, real quality, real beautiful, and it will last you a lifetime.
Yeah, no, that's great. And talking more too about like the culinary aspect, Carolyn was wondering, are there any, Scottish food specialties?
Well, yes. I mean, I'll have to say, before I did this job, I used to be a chef, so I know all about that. I think I gave a few recipes actually initially here. Haggis, of course, is the most famous dish that comes out of Scotland, and it's they run wild in the hills. They're beautiful little animals, and we have the audacity to eat them. No, they're not. They're made out of offal, and it's not to everyone's taste. But I'm a huge fan of haggis, and I think I put in a recipe which is one of my favorites, which was one that was invented by Queen Victoria's chef, and it's called steak balmoral, and it's a whiskey and mustard sauce. So Scotch single malt whiskey, good Scottish mustard, cream sauce with a steak, and all on top of a big pile or a big dod of haggis.
I would agree with Austin on the haggis. I love a haggis, and when I do whiskey tastings, I love it. Believe it or not, above any double wood poured over to a haggis is wonderful. But I love our seafood. I think scallops, some of the Scottish lobster, salmon, the Scottish smoked salmon is just to die for. So our seafood, as well as haggis, is highly, highly recommended.
I have my stomach grumbling. This sounds delicious. Haggis sounds adventurous, but also delicious.
It's a must-have.
And
yes,
you can take it home in a tin as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And we also, it seems like we have a good number of Outlander fans joining us today. Marla was wondering, are there any Outlander filming sites that we typically visit on our Scotland tours?
Yes, there are. I mean, walk down the high street of Edinburgh, just down from the castle, and you've got closes and everything there where they filmed Outlander. I always like to take my groups to Culloden Moor, which is where the famous defeat of the Jacobites happened in 1746. We go there, and from there they can go on to Clava Cairns. Also, when we're in Glasgow, if people are really interested in Outlander, I like to take groups to Glasgow Cathedral, because the second season of Outlander, they used the undercroft, the lower part of the church, in there as well. And I have actually done, for Go Ahead, I've done a customized tour of 20 odd people on an Outlander tour. So we went to loads and loads of the sites. So we went to Blackness Castle as well, and Linlithgow Palace. So yes, you can customize your tour, but we do see a lot of Outlander stuff on the tour. And you also pass the studios where it's filmed.
That's awesome. That's great. And we have some more people too who are wondering some more things about kilts specifically. So for people who might not want to buy like a kilt, is there opportunity to purchase, the fabric that you could make into a scarf or things like that? Other opportunities of purchasing tartans in other forms?
Yes, yeah. There's no end of that. Wouldn't you say, Neil?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, and again, the high street, as Austin alluded to earlier on, from the castle down, there's dozens and dozens of woolen shops, and I would be very careful. I hate to refer to things as tat, but there's some of the shops, cheap holiday stuff, but some absolutely tremendous quality of tartan scarves made of cashmere, and would last your lifetime. Absolutely first class quality stuff.
And just to add to that, that's the advantage of going with a tour director, because we won't let you go. We won't let you go into the tatty shops. We'll point you at the good places that you should be going to.
That's great. Well, yes, we're glad to have you guys as our resource to let us know where to go and where not to go. Well, as we're drawing close, I have one last question for you guys. I would love to hear from both of you, your favorite place to visit in Scotland.
Oh, Austin, you go first, Austin.
Well, okay. I didn't have time to mention it earlier on, but in that slide of Loch Lomond with the little map in it, if anyone was looking in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a place called Benmore Gardens. It's on the west coast. It's just getting towards the sea. And it's an arboretum. It has some of the oldest trees in the whole of the United Kingdom. I'm very interested in like flora, fauna, and I'm getting really into birds. Hello again, John. But I really, really love Benmore Gardens. It's a hidden gem. You have to drive out of your way to get to it. It's amazing. And my local pub, the Bell Jar.
I have two places up, or three, including my local pub, sitting in the beer garden just now. But I'm a keen golfer, so St Andrews, even to a local, St Andrews being the home of golf, is well worth a visit. And it's not just for golf, it's a real historical town with the castle and the old abbey as well. But I think my favourite town and place to visit is Pitlochry, which is in Perthshire. And it has two reasons. It has a view called the Queen's View, about 4 miles out of town, and it's the most stunning view up Loch Tummel and the view of Schiehallion, which is the most perfect mountain in the world. And they actually used Schiehallion to in the 18th century to work out the Earth's mass. But it also is the home of my favourite distillery, Edredour. So Pitlochry has to be my favourite place to visit in Scotland.
And I forgot to mention earlier, of course, this tour does have an extension, does have a day trip to St Andrews that you can add in as well, and it's absolutely worth it, not least of all for the local guide Fergus, who's very good looking.
Love it. That's great. Well, Austin and Neil, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so great hearing all about our Edinburgh and Castles of Scotland tour. For those of you who would love to join us on a trip to Scotland, we'd love to talk with you more about our tour options. If you're interested in seeing that military tattoo that Austin had mentioned, we do have a special event tour, which is the same as this itinerary, just adding in that opportunity to see the tattoo. Or if you're wanting to see Scotland and some of the other surrounding countries like Ireland or England. We have multi-country tours as well. So whatever, fits your interest, let us know. We are more than happy to chat with you about it and have you join us on tour. And also, if you'd love to, we'd love to have you join us for some of our upcoming travel talks. Next week, we are going to be talking about our U.S. national parks. As I mentioned, we are running our tours there now. So we're hearing more from one of our tour directors about the specific parks we visit, as well as a talk with our president, Heidi, about some of our questions about travel moving forward and some of these others mentioned here. So feel free to check out our website at goaheadtours.com/webinars and to learn more about what is coming. But again, thank you all so much for joining us. It was wonderful to talk with Neil and Austin today, learning about whiskey, Scotland traditions. So we hope to see you with us on tour in Scotland soon, but have a wonderful evening, everybody. And cheers again.
Thanks.
Aikiva. Aikiva.
Thank you.